want to give everyone here an opportunity to maybe ask Dan a question or two.
My name is Jamie, and I'm working on a Stop 22 campaign.
Awesome.
And all I want to do is say thank you for your service.
Thank you so much. My honor. I wouldn't trade a day. Thank you.
So feel free to come up. We got a few minutes. So we actually had Dan come to Washington, D.C. in my attempt to try to break through, and he was absolutely phenomenal. So we have a studio in Georgetown that I go to, which is a Baptiste yoga studio, hot yoga, and we had Dan come in, and he did a little fundraiser at the yoga studio. So all the money was donated to Wounded Warrior, which is the bracelet I wear here. All right. And he was absolutely phenomenal, but to try, I know a lot of us are trying to break through with these practices, and to be able to say, you know, this isn't Tim Ryan, the congressman, or this isn't this person or that. This is a veteran who obviously bears a lot of the wounds of war that that promotes these practices to not only heal veterans, but to heal school children and people in their lives is very, very powerful. So we appreciate it.
Hi, thank you. I'm from Baltimore as well. So that was
Go Orioles.
I was really touched by the part you shared when you first felt the ground through your legs. And I'm a physical therapist and work with a lot of people with amputation, so it touched me personally as well. And I'd be curious to hear you just say a little bit more about that and what it's been like to maybe share that experience with your veteran friends.
Absolutely. So it's funny because when you're an amputee, like, you're no longer physically connected to the earth, but I've been on the earth before, right? So I remember what it's like, but it was a thing that we've all, and I don't want to say we've all, this room may be a little different than the military rooms I'm usually used to talking to, but it's something that we easily take for granted, the power of this earth underneath of us and the source, the constant source of energy, that it's available to us all the time. And most of us go through life like not knowing that. And for some reason, I became so aware of it through not being physically connected to the earth that when I finally got back in touch with it, it was an incredibly powerful experience. But I've seen other people have very similar breakthroughs who've had their legs their whole life because they just never took the time and got present to the fact that this is real. Like the earth is powerful and real, and that's a source of energy. So I work with veterans and everyone, and I've seen the same breakthroughs happen because it's something that most of us don't think about. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, and maybe just personally with some of your friends who were like, Dan, you went to yoga?
Oh yeah,
you know,
it's one of the in the military community. It's not bad. It's not a negative thing. It's an ignorance thing that they don't get it because most of them have been spent a lifetime in a training environment where they're taught everything they need to know, and mindfulness isn't part of that. And neither is awareness of the earth, and neither is focus on breath and getting out of your head and into your body. Those things aren't taught to them in the military system. So it's such an outside, like most of the people that I grew up with in the military would look at most of the people in this room with love and also a judgment that you guys are weird. Yeah, right. I mean, for real.
It's a good judgment.
Right, exactly. And that's just because you're so different. But the same people, given an opportunity, would look at this room and say, I wish I had the peace that you have. And so that's where I see myself fitting in that, to try to help educate and translate some of that in a way that makes sense for them, like a no-nonsense. Because most of you, not most of you, but I'm sure many in this room have forgotten more about yoga than I know. And so I am in that unique position where I get to be relevant to them because I'm not that far removed from where they are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. You are a total babe, by the way. I'm married, but you got it. Yeah. So, I mean, inside and out, it's just
You want
Thank
to come
you
up
for
here
this.
and sit down next to him?
Well, I'm staff. I have backstage access. So, but anyway, I'm kidding. Not about the babe part, but thank you. I have worked with yoga for prisoners, and I've worked with yoga for lawyers. I'm a yoga teacher and a lawyer, not a prisoner. But I then was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and my left side sloped. And fortunately, it all came back. But now I want to bring yoga to people with MS through the National MS Society, and I'm applying for a job, and I'll get it.
Nice.
But one thing
Manifest
that,
it.
yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. One thing I have a question about is when you lost trust and faith in your body, which happened with me, what sort of practices did you have? Because you had that moment, I get it, when you ground and you feel it, and I do yoga and I ground and I feel it, but when you lose that trust in your body, in the balance, in your ability, and things don't work like they used to, and you have to re-meet everything in your body and trust that, is grounding all that really does it for you, or is there a practice that you would recommend that I could share with people with MS? I mean, I have my own experience, but I'd like to know yours as well.
Yeah, so grounding is great, and it's, I would say that that's the source behind it, but what I had to work most on is letting go and humility. To like, okay, I fell down, big deal, right? So, and I tell people all the time in their yoga practice, so even if like everyone loses trust in your body, perfectly able-bodied or not, especially if they're trying to get access to something greater in a certain pose. And I'll see the fear, and it's all really fear. And I'll see the fear as a teacher, and I just call it out. I said, what are you afraid of? You're 2 feet off the ground. You're not going to break anything. So just go, like take a breath, inhale, release, push your hip forward, take your arm back, and then I would just watch people explode and like unfold in these great, amazing postures. And I think it'd be the same thing. It's just to say it's okay to fail. And the worst case is they have to get up and try again.
All right. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. I wouldn't trade a day.
Thank you for your service. 2 things. One, just an announcement, and the other, a request.
Okay.
So I'm on the board of a group called Citizen Well, whose executive director is here. Representative Ryan is an advisor to this group, and we work for the well-being of all. And anyone who's in this room or was in the healthcare room that wants to join and be part of a mindfulness group that's helping to serve veterans or people in poverty, they do meditation, they do those kinds of things very actively. And then a personal request. Carrie's dad was taken from us in 9/11. He was a firefighter. And I know the impact on her family. And we have brainstormed long about who could be the person to come and speak, as she's a yoga teacher, very well known, to those firefighters who have PTSD. And we've been like, it's got to be a dude, and he's got to be this guy. And
A babe, preferably a babe.
it could be her.
I got you. I got you.
But I think between them, they've got the babe and the dude thing down.
Yeah.
So we want to invite you on behalf of Citizen Well to New York and to talk to some of the 9/11 families and some of the firefighters who have PTSD, if you would.
It would be my honor. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your service. My brother is also a veteran, and so this is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I was just like sobbing as you were telling your story. And I've lived watching him come back from Iraq and suffer. And then, like I've been in this yoga meditation practice for a while now, and I want so badly for him to come to a place of peace. And sometimes, like, your older sister isn't the person to tell you, this is what you need, this is what you should do. And so I backed off, hoping that I could just lead by example.
Right.
But I'm still, there's still a place in my heart that deeply wants to help him because I love him so much. Do you have any advice for me?
I do. So this is what we try to do, especially with the people we really care about. Like, we want to fix them and help them. And I would just say, maybe change your language from, you really need this, to say, will you just come to yoga with me?
Yeah.
And that's it. And then just politely, softly, and then just keep being an invitation until he finally gets fed up with you and goes to yoga. And then like afterwards you can say like, what'd you think? And then start a discussion about what's next or not next.
Yeah, I think I sometimes try too hard to, it has to come from another veteran, or it has to come from someone who's been through the hardship that he's and seen what he's seen.
Right.
And I'm hopeful that that's not the case, because obviously that's not where I come from.
Got it. And that's a really great point, because there's a lot of veterans yoga groups starting up because it's important. And having the label, if you will, of veteran, it comes with a host of judgments. Like it or not, it does. The damaged and because it's actually true. Many return home from war different than when they left. But now there's this awareness, and so every veteran is stigmatized in a way, that they're all dealing or they're all broken, and they may feel like that, but there are also many of us who are broken and feel like that in different ways, in different times of our lives, in different seasons, and from different things. So all these veterans groups are springing up, and like, we're going to teach trauma-sensitive yoga to veterans, like, don't put their back to a door, and don't touch them from behind in an assist, and don't do these things. And all that's really doing is exacerbating their symptoms, because their brain, with PTSD, the way it works, it's a very normal reaction to an abnormal situation that most people hope to never be in, and then their brain gets hardwired into having, I can't have my back to the door because that's danger, so we have to, face the crowd and know where the exits are, and loud noises usually means something bad is about to happen, or they have to go into action, so a loud noise at home will trigger the same response. But it was based in reality, now they get here, and it's no longer real. And the more and more we speak to those symptoms, the more we're making it real for them right here. And so that's why I'm not necessarily in disagreement with what people are doing in the veterans yoga space, but it's a caution for me, because I would just rather be the yoga room has a veteran next to the teacher, who's next to the doctor, who's next to the rape victim, who's next to the trauma surgeon, they're just because we're all just human beings. And that's what this space should be about. It's not because I'm a veteran, I need to be around other veterans. No, as a veteran, I need to be around other human beings. Because we all have trauma in our lives, and there are some veterans who pale in comparison to the levels of trauma that people who are in yoga and have healed have gone through in their own lives. So that's the thing, and it takes a while to get that. But yoga is about unity. It means unity. And so when you have a veterans community, that's great, and a yoga community, that's great. But when you start to create a veterans yoga community, that's not so great, because that's not union. That is apartheid. It's separate. It's not okay. So yeah, I would just say keep inviting him, but not from a place of fixing him, but from a place of like having that space benefit from his presence.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi. I actually had the same question as Celeste. So I'm going to sort of see if there's like another deeper layer. There's someone so important to me in my life, and I think he would say in this room, like, she is so weird, and I wish she had the peace that I had. I think she would say that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious, like, outside of the yoga room, how outside of that invitation, like, what was the support that you needed?
Friendship, trust, someone. It's people, like, we are examples of what we preach. So I could get up into a yoga class, and I see this, unfortunately, in the yoga community and all communities, where they're one way in front of people, but they live their life in a completely different way. And it's about authenticity. So if your peace stems from what's real for you in your life, and they notice that off the mat, away from yoga, away from your meditation practice, and then I think naturally they'll just be, and just being an authentic friend, that will warm up the idea and also being you can't forget to be an invitation, because there's still going to be some fear, but they're not going to all of a sudden say, okay, you're so cool, I'm finally going to do meditation with you, or I'm finally going to do yoga. You still have to say, you should come. And I don't know if that answered your question, but that's...
From the people who were closest to you while you were in those darkest moments, yeah, like what, or maybe it's just like there is no answer to that question. Like,
Well, yeah, I was going to say, like, so for Anna, for my first yoga teacher, she was just there. You know, had call me if you need me. But she wasn't, like, in my face. She just recognized that I was going through something and was offering herself that she was there. And that's when I was in that moment and I needed to call someone, that's why I called her. Yeah. Thank you.
We're almost out of time, so if we can whip through these real quick, and we'll just end with the gentleman in the back. It'll be the last question.
Great. Thanks, Dan. That was very inspiring what you shared. I'm reading this book called Shantaram, and there's a quote, nations neglect no men, and I'll add, or women, more shamefully than the heroes of their wars. And is there anything that we can do to encourage, our leaders to be more responsive? Because I'm sure that not everybody has a community or a friend, not every veteran who's enrolling them in these types of healing experiences.
It's a great question, and I think the answer to that is, so like the leaders, so I can look at Tim for an example. He's a leader of our government, and he's doing the right things, but it's like the role of Congress or the role of leadership in a society typically isn't to honor individual groups. It's to make sure the whole thing moves. So I would say instead to be a leader in that space if it's important. To raise awareness for those things, and whether that's creating a foundation or a nonprofit or just a movement like the 22 a day campaign that we talked about earlier. It takes individuals doing that, and because it's not necessarily, and this is I'm one of the people, so it's not necessarily the role of the leaders, in my opinion. It's again my opinion. It's the role of the people who care enough to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's going to work.
I can hear you.
So do you have a favorite pose?
A favorite what?
A favorite pose.
Post?
Pose.
Pose, a favorite pose. Shavasana. Yes.
And a second quick question. Do you think that wisdom, this kind of a format, could translate into a conference, Wisdom for Warriors? Do you feel like or is it too flaky?
I feel like it could, but there'd be like 7 people.
It's like a dinner meeting.
Thank you.
Just if you could be real quick.
Yes, I'll be very
Thanks.
brief. Definitely want to thank you for your service that you have done and that you're continuing to do. And I will say that I'm married to a fire captain, and so my question is very much along the lines of what we heard, but I have 2 specific questions as my previous questions were asked, and that is, did it make, was starting with meditation, was that easier for you as opposed to going to yoga? And then related to that, going to the private lesson, starting with a private lesson as opposed to the general practice, and any words of wisdom about?
For me, yes and yes, because meditation was done one-on-one.
Right.
And somebody taught it to me, and then it worked, and I got it. And the same thing with the private lesson. Nobody wants to jump in.
Right.
I think it would be beneficial for someone to jump in who had all their pieces and wasn't limited physically, but for someone like me, it really helped for the private lesson because it took away any of the fear I had.
Okay.
That makes sense. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Hi. I was wondering if you had any tips on letting go of the ego in the yoga room, in particular, attachment to physical appearance and ability.
Any tips for letting go? It's just really the inquiry of getting to knowing that you need to let it go. So And then once you get there, then everything is a spring from that. Like if you know you need to let it go, and then you can adopt that as reality, then letting go becomes easier. You got to start with that. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
I guess I'm the guy in the back. So great. And I hope I didn't break the microphone. I'll just dip down a little bit.
Chair pose. Go.
First and foremost, I want to say I see you and I recognize you.
Thank you.
I'm a 24-year veteran. I was also a contract operator on the ground during the time of your situation. Now also, just hearing your story, I kind of feel like I'm not alone out here right now. I live here in California, and I spend all of my time pretty much trying to do outreach and set this example of being a sensitive man with this background that we have.
Right.
So I have a lot of these Taoist meditation and Qigong exercises that I was in the zone with and continuing to injure myself, thinking I was impervious to the harms of war, which haunt me every day, as you know. But now I'm out here all the time trying to come from that place, like you said, just be us in this way. And it really does open up the door for a lot of other vets, you know. And I use the Qigong, the meditation, natural plant medicines, because most of our brothers are also killing themselves with the pharmaceuticals that are going into them. So I just wanted to say I'm going to get my card, and I'm to you later, and get yours. And I'm available to anyone in California or on the planet worldwide if it comes to helping vets.
Amen.
You know.
Thanks,
so,
Calvin.
Thank you, brother.
Dan Nevins.
Connected to the earth, but I've been on the earth before, right? So I remember what it was like, but it was a thing that we've all, and I don't want to say we've all, this room may be a little different than the military rooms I'm usually used to talking to, but it's something that we easily take for granted, the power of this earth underneath of us and the source, the constant source of energy, it's available to us all the time. And most of us go through life like not knowing that. And for some reason, I became so aware of it through not being physically connected to the earth that when I finally got back in touch with it, it was an incredibly...
And their lives is very, very powerful, so we appreciate it.
Hi, thank you. I'm from Baltimore as well. So that was
Go Orioles.
I was really touched by the part you shared when you first felt the ground through your legs. And I'm a physical therapist and work with a lot of people with amputation, so it touched me personally as well. And I'd be curious to hear you just say a little bit more about that and what it's been like to maybe share that experience with your veteran friends.
Absolutely. So it's funny because when you're an amputee, like you're no longer physically...
Studio in Georgetown that I go to, which is a Baptiste yoga studio, hot yoga, and we had Dan come in, and he did a little fundraiser at the yoga studio. So all the money was donated to Wounded Warrior, which is the bracelet I wear here. All right. And he was absolutely phenomenal. But to try, I know a lot of us are trying to break through with these practices and to be able to say, you know, this isn't Tim Ryan, the congressman, or this isn't this person or that. This is a veteran who obviously bears a lot of the wounds of war that promotes these practices to not only heal veterans, but to heal school children and people in their... We want to give everyone here an opportunity to maybe ask Dan a question or two.
My name is Jamie, and I'm working on a Stop 22 campaign.
Awesome.
And all I want to do is say thank you for your service.
Thank you so much. My honor. I wouldn't trade a day. Thank you.
So feel free to come up. We got a few minutes. So we actually had Dan come to Washington, D.C. in my attempt to try to break through, and he was absolutely phenomenal. So we have a
Powerful experience. But I've seen other people have very similar breakthroughs who've had their legs their whole life because they just never took the time and got present to the fact that this is real. Like the earth is powerful and real, and that's a source of energy. So I work with veterans and everyone, and I've seen the same breakthroughs happen because it's something that most of us don't think about. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, and maybe just personally with some of your friends who were like, Dan, you went to yoga?
Oh yeah,
You know,
it's one of the in the